Hello, and thanks for joining me. Take a blank sheet of paper. On that paper, write down the name of every god that you believe exists. If you believe in a god for whom you don't have a name, just write down a basic description of it. If you believe in a god whom you can neither name nor describe, just write down in parentheses, God whom I can neither name nor describe. Then put down the pen and look at the sheet of paper. If there is something, anything, written on that sheet of paper, you are a theist. If the sheet of paper is still blank, you are an atheist. This is the standard test I give to someone who says that they don't know if they're a theist or an atheist, or who insists that they are neither. I had one guy, after I gave him this test, show me that he had written a big question mark on the paper. I told him, either you didn't follow my instructions, which is fine since this is entirely for your benefit anyway, or you believe in the existence of a god whose name is question mark, or who is best described with the question mark, which is also fine. Either way, if you're able to understand my instructions, then you don't get to escape the theism-atheism dichotomy. Now, I can think of any number of prudential reasons not to call yourself an atheist, even if you are one. Maybe you think that the whole idea of theism and atheism shouldn't even be something that's talked about, in the same way we don't talk about belief or non-belief in leprechauns and fairies. Or maybe you just don't like labels in general, especially when they distract from work that you're trying to do in the public sphere. I am sympathetic to both these reasons, and if you don't want to call yourself an atheist, or if you don't want to be called an atheist, I can do my best to respect that. Presumably, if I care about your opinion in the first place, then there are other things that I'm willing to call you. For example,
the only ist I am is a scientist. The moment once someone attaches you to a philosophy or a movement, then they assign all the baggage and all the rest of the philosophy that goes with it to you. And when you want to have a conversation, they will assert that they already know everything important there is to know about you because of that association. And that's not the way to have a conversation.
Unfortunately, Dr. Tyson has a point here. There is a lot of baggage associated with the atheist label in many parts of society. This shouldn't be the case. People should be aware that just because two people do not believe a God exists, it doesn't follow that those two people agree on literally anything else about the world. One of the reasons I'm making this video is to get that message out. Atheism is not materialism or non-materialism. It is not physicalism or non-physicalism. It is not naturalism or non-naturalism. It is compatible with both skepticism and anti-skepticism, with moral realism and moral anti-realism, with solipsism and with actually having a brain. The only philosophical position that atheism is incompatible with is theism. Strictly speaking, atheism is even compatible with the conclusion of most, if not all, arguments for the existence of God. The universe was created, the creator need not have been a god. The universe was designed, the designer need not have been a god. Jesus was resurrected from the dead, the agent or force behind the resurrection need not have been a god. You can argue that if you accept the conclusion of all these arguments, there comes a point where it becomes silly to still call yourself an atheist. But you can. It is consistent, if perhaps not rational, to accept every argument for the existence of God and still be an atheist. Theism only comes if and when you accept the hidden premise contained in all these arguments, which is that the agent or force behind the phenomenon being appealed to is in fact a God. So what is agnosticism? Agnosticism is the position that one can't know whether God exists. Or more broadly, it's the condition of not knowing whether God exists. If someone says they're an agnostic, they may be saying that no one can know if God exists, or they may be saying that they themselves do not know. I've seen it used both ways. I've also seen it used as a middle ground between theist and atheist, and it isn't. The issue with atheism is the existence of God. The issue with agnosticism is knowledge of whether God exists. Agnosticism is compatible with both theism and atheism. Graham Oppy, who is one of the most respected non-theistic philosophers currently active, does prefer to use atheism to refer only to strong atheism, the positive claim that God does not exist, and agnosticism to refer to weak atheism, the lack of belief in the existence of God. His reason is that if we differentiate between strong and weak atheists, then it would only make sense to differentiate between strong and weak theists, where a strong theist believes that God exists and a weak theist lacks belief that no God exists. I don't agree with Professor Oppy's reasoning. There is no ambiguity in the word theist, as there is in the word atheist. Historically, the word has never been claimed by those he would identify as agnostics. Also, reserving the word agnostic for weak atheists leaves those who identify as positive agnostic atheists, those who believe that God does not exist but that this is not or cannot be known, scrambling in the dirt. For that matter, it does the same to those who identify as positive Gnostic atheists. In a world where Christian and Islamic forces are loudly and often violently insistent that the law of the land should reflect the position that the existence of God has been established, I think there is great utility in an umbrella term for all who beg to differ with that position. So when someone tells me they're an agnostic, instead of telling me they're a theist or an atheist, I give them the benefit of the doubt that they have reason for calling themselves that, rather than openly placing themselves into either the theist camp or the atheist camp. But when someone proposes to tell me that they're not an atheist, I invite them to go ahead and tell me why they believe that God exists. Now let's talk about former atheists. Christian apologists who call themselves former atheists are pretty thick on the ground these days. On the one hand, this might seem surprising since Christianity is dominant in the Western world, for now, and a given Christian is quite a bit more likely to have been born into the faith than to have converted from atheism or from another religion. But on the other hand, it is a fact that those who convert to a new worldview as an adult, even as a young adult, can be quite passionate about it. Now, when many Christians claim to be former atheists, it turns out on examination that they were either apathetic Christians or misotheists, Christian theists who hated God. To many of the faithful, atheism is a different kind of umbrella term, one used to refer to anyone with insufficient fervor. Here's a pretty typical example of a testimony of a former atheist named Jason Kelty.
I went through the public school system and watched a lot of TV, including shows like Cosmos and Nova. I was extremely selfish, profane, a pothead, a thief, a liar, a cheater, and already buried in debt. I was very outspoken as an atheist. I would say, "Thank Darwin," instead of "Thank God." And when other people said "Thank God," I would rudely say, "Who?"
He continues by describing how he went from this rather obnoxious sort of atheism to young earth creationism by way of Kent Hovind's video seminars. Yes, this PBS Carl Sagan fan claims to have been convinced by Kent Hovind. And the hell of it is, for all I know, his claim is perfectly true. So this brings me to another point about atheism. Just because one is an atheist doesn't mean that one is an intellectually grounded atheist. Some atheists were born that way and have never really thought about it. Others, and I believe Kelty is one of them, may have adopted a persona of intellectual grounding, but that persona will crack under the slightest pressure if it is backed up by lies, cheating, stealing, pot, and, I can barely say this with a straight face, saying "thank Darwin" instead of saying "thank God." Folks, I've been an atheist for over 20 years and I still say "thank God." It's a convention of language. It no more attaches me to Christianity than saying Thursday or Thorsday attaches a Christian to Norse mythology. I believe that Kelty wasn't the least bit intellectually grounded as an atheist. In fact, I think it's possible that that part of his testimony is a lie. There are others for whom that isn't necessarily the case. For example, YouTuber The Reconverted Catholic describes his atheism like this.
I then became a bit of a debate and call-in show junkie. I watched the new atheists, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Dan Barker, Richard Carrier, David Fitzgerald, and the list goes on and on. Those folks appear, to decimate religious apologists, and practically had a man crush or bromance, whatever you want to call it, on Matt Dillahunty, who, in my eyes, was the king of smacking down religious beliefs, and he's still very well known.
He started his return to Catholicism by watching a debate between Trent Horn and Richard Carrier, and being impressed by how Horn methodically picked apart Carrier's points. I haven't seen the debate, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened, as the topic of the debate was the historicity of Jesus. The view that a historical Jesus existed is orthodox even among atheists, and Carrier would have been fighting quite the uphill battle. Anyway, the Reconverted Catholic wrapped up his conversion by watching more Trent Horn and other apologists. He doesn't say what those apologists said that he found so compelling, so I'm not in a position to judge the rational warrant for his reconversion, but I am in a position to say that his atheist phase sounds a lot like my atheist phase. Wait, what? Dave, I thought you were an atheist. I am. But before I was an atheist, I was a Christian. And when I was a Christian, I went through an atheist phase. It lasted about a year or two, and basically, as embarrassing as it is to admit today, it had a lot to do with Ayn Rand. This was back in the 90s before the internet became widespread, so Ayn Rand was what I had instead of Matt Dillahunty. And in retrospect, I'm not 100% sure I was an atheist at all, because what brought me back was the realization that I couldn't reconcile the things I was reading with the existence of the Christian God. And I did, after all, believe that God existed. And I didn't so much reject God's existence as I managed to just not think about it for a year or two, a fact that in retrospect seems incredible to me. So for the rest of my life as a Christian, I might have been one of those false former atheists I was talking about. By contrast, the reconverted Catholic sounds like he really was an atheist. At least he's given me no reason to doubt it. But in every other respect, his atheist phase sounds like my atheist phase, only longer. So it might be interesting to check back with him in, 5 years or so. Meanwhile, when a Christian tells you that they are a former atheist, unless you have a specific reason to be skeptical, I encourage you to take their word for it. It's really not that extraordinary of a claim, which is another sign of the progress atheism has made compared with a few decades ago. But the key question is, does their atheism have applicability to your atheism? If you are secretly a theist, or if you have no intellectual grounding for your atheism, or if intellectual grounding is secondary to your desire to be a firebrand and sound awesome in front of your peers like Dillahunty, then, like the former atheists out there, you also might be destined to relapse back into Christianity. As for me, I have yet to meet a single former atheist, or a single lifelong Christian for that matter, who has a firm intellectual grounding for their theism. What kind of atheist they were, why they converted to Christianity, those questions only interest me if they can change my mind about my own atheism. I've long since stopped worrying that a perfectly just God might send me to hell for not believing, but I still want to be right about as many things as possible. That's why I'll become a theist if the evidence warrants it. It's also why I am an atheist today. If you enjoyed this video and want to help my channel grow, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And if you want to share your own concept of atheism, or believe you have a firm intellectual grounding for your theism, leave a comment below. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again. I'm David John Wellman, and the rest is up to you.